On this episode of Black Girl Gone, I'm revisiting a story that continues to haunt so many of us: the mysterious death of Tamla Horsford, a woman who went to a slumber party and never made it home. This case, first released on the show in 2021, has remained one of the most requested, most talked about stories we've ever covered, and for good reason. The questions still far outweigh the answers. Was it really an accident, or was there something much more sinister behind what happened that night? As we take another look at Tamla's story, I hope it serves as a reminder of how easily justice can slip away and why we must continue to ask the hard questions, even when the system stops looking for answers. Tamla St. Jour was born on October 10th, 1978, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, a small island in the Caribbean where she spent her early years of life, surrounded by family and culture. She was one of two daughters born to her parents. It was just Tamla and her sister Summer. In 1989, when Tamla was 11, her family left their island home and moved to the Bronx in New York in search of new opportunities and a better future. But there's not a lot of public information about Tamla's life in those years after the move. What we do know is that she eventually met her husband Leander Horsford while living in Florida. Leander had a daughter from a previous relationship, and after they got married, Tamala gave birth to five sons. She embraced motherhood fully, always putting her family first. Leander's job eventually would bring the family to Georgia, to the town of Cummings. It's a small, mostly white community in Forsyth County, a place not exactly known for its diversity or inclusion, but the Horfords made a life there. Tamla quickly adjusted to their new surroundings. She spent her days volunteering at her son's school and running them to and from after school activities, especially football and Little League games. She was a hands on mom, always present, always cheering her boys on from the sidelines. Those who knew Tamla described her as warm, kind, and full of life. She had a magnetic personality, the kind of person who made you feel at ease just by being around her. She was funny, charismatic, and the type of woman who would light up a room with her energy. And even though she was just one of a few black women in the area, Tamala still found her community. She built friendships with the other football moms, bonded over motherhood, and brought joy to those around her. She was the kind of woman who didn't just show up, she showed out. And that's what makes what happened to her so hard to understand. By 2018, Tamla and her family were settled in life in Georgia, and it was full. Her sons were growing up fast, and her stepdaughter, who Tamla had raised like her own, was now an adult starting her own life. Things were good. She was doing what she loved most: being a mom, supporting her family, and staying connected to the community. That fall, one of the women that Tamala had become friends with, someone she had met through her son's football team, was planning a birthday celebration. It was going to be the 45th birthday party for Jean Myers, and the plan was to have what they called an old school pajama party. A sleepover, drinks, food, and fun. A night for the women to let loose without having to worry about driving home. The party was going to be held at John's house on the night of November 3rd, 2018. Guests were supposed to arrive around 7 p.m., but Tamla, like most moms with a house full of kids, had things to take care of before she could head out. She cooked dinner for her family, made sure everything was in order, and then finally made her way to the party. She got there around 8:30 p.m., and honestly, that's such a mom thing. I don't think I've been on time for anything since having kids, so Tamla showing up a little late is completely relatable. Now, according to everyone at the party, Tamla walked in and instantly became the life of it. She changed into her pajamas, a cozy white onesie covered in paw prints, and brought along a bottle of tequila, reportedly as a gift for Jean. Now, most of the women at the party were friends and acquaintances through football, though there were a couple of women that Tamla didn't know. But as the night went on, the women drank, laughed, and played games. The vibe was casual and fun. Now, according to reports, Tamala was drinking the tequila that she brought, and while everyone else was drinking too, several of the women pointed out that Tamala was the only one drinking the tequila. Now, this was supposed to be a ladies only event, but Jean's boyfriend, Jose, and another guest's husband ended up staying. The women mostly stayed upstairs while the men watched football in the basement. Eventually, everyone gathered together to play Cards Against Humanity, and by all accounts, the energy was still light and happy. Tamala, who was a smoker, stepped out on the back deck periodically throughout the night to smoke, and there are photos from the party that show her smiling, having fun, just enjoying a night out with friends. There's even a video where she appears to be in really good spirits. She doesn't look overly intoxicated, and other guests later say that she didn't seem that drunk. Around 11:30 p.m., Tamala FaceTimed her husband to check in, something she likely did regularly when she was out for the night. After that, things slowly started to wind down at the party. Two of the women left not long after. They hadn't planned to stay overnight and had to get home to their kids. By about 1 a.m., most of the guests had gone to bed. Tamala, however, wasn't ready for the party to be over, and according to those there, she was trying to get people to stay up with her, but eventually, even the last remaining person turned in. Now, Jean and Jose say that they went to bed around 1:30 a.m., and at that time, Tamala was still awake along with another woman named Bridget. Bridget says that she left the party at about 1:47 a.m. And according to her, Tamala was eating a bowl of gumbo and mentioned that she was going to smoke one last cigarette before going to bed. The home security system seems to support Bridget's timeline, confirming her departure from the home at 1:47. But no one else has admitted to seeing Tamala alive after that. The next morning, at around 8:45, Jean's aunt, Madeline, who also lived in the home but strangely isn't listed as one of the party guests, woke up and began making her morning coffee. Now, she was in the basement when she looked out of the window and saw something that stopped her cold. Tamala's body lying face down in the backyard. And she told police that she could see the white onesie with paw prints and immediately knew that something was wrong. She said she dropped to her knees and prayed. And then she went upstairs to tell Jean and Jose what she had just seen. Now, according to reports, she said to Jean that, quote, something is wrong with your friend from the islands, which is honestly a strange way to refer to someone who had been living in the U.S. since she was 11. Yes, Tamala was born in the Caribbean, but she had spent nearly 3 decades in this country, so that comment just feels off. And to be honest, it sounds more like something said in hindsight to kind of clean up a much less polite, insensitive remark. Madeline, however, tells Jean and Jose what she saw, and according to them, they then got dressed and went outside. But it was clear Tamala was already dead. Just before 9 a.m., Jean placed a 911 call, and in that audio, she immediately begins offering what sounds like an explanation for Tamala's death before any real questions are even asked. It's as if she's already setting the stage, trying to frame the narrative from the very beginning. Now, after Jean speaks to the dispatcher, she passes the phone to her boyfriend Jose, and he tells the dispatcher that Tamala isn't moving. The 911 operator then asks if he sees any blood, and Jose responds that he's not sure, that he doesn't know if he should move her to check if there's blood underneath her. And then the dispatcher asked him if Tamala was breathing. And that's when it becomes clear that no one had even checked. Now, think about that. Tamala was lying face down in the backyard, and not one person at the scene, people who claimed to be her friends, had even made any effort to see if she was still alive. Now, throughout the call, both Jean and Jose mentioned that Tamala had been drinking and speculate that she may have fallen off the balcony. But what stands out most to so many people who have listened to this call is the tone, the complete lack of urgency or distress in their voices. There seems to be no panic, no desperation, no sense of shock that someone that they had just spent the night with was now lying lifeless in their backyard. Instead, the call feels almost clinical, matter of fact, as if they were calling about a broken fence, not the unexpected death of a friend. And that's something that to this day continues to bother people and raises questions about what really happened to Tamla Horsford. Because the more you look at the details, the more you start to realize that not everything about that night adds up. And what happened after the 911 call? Well, that only deepens the mystery. This video is sponsored by BetterHelp. Do you ever hit a point in your life where you just stop and think, this isn't how I thought things would look by now? That's where I've been. I thought I'd feel more sure of myself, more together, but lately it's been a lot of quiet anxiety. Like I'm carrying more than I can say out loud. And I used to think that I could just push through it, but honestly, I needed help. And therapy gave me a space to just be real. What finally made me open up to therapy was realizing I needed someone outside my circle, someone trained to help me sort through this without judgment. That's why I want to tell you about BetterHelp. They make starting therapy simple. Just fill out a quick questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist in days. If it's not the right fit, switch anytime, no extra costs. With 7,000 plus reviews and a 4.3 rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform you can trust. Go to betterhelp.com/blackgirlgone or click the link in the description to get 10% off your first month. Take care of you. You deserve that. On November 3rd, 2018, 40-year-old Tamla Horsford attended a birthday party. The next morning, she was found dead in the backyard. Immediately, questions began about how she died, questions about the people who were there, and most importantly, questions about whether this was really an accident at all. About 15 minutes after the 911 call, police arrived at the scene. The officers quickly determined that Tamla was already dead, and so they told the EMTs that they didn't need to come out after all. From the start, it was clear that the police believed the story that the homeowners told, that Tamla's death was an accident, and because of that, they treated the scene accordingly, approaching it as if it was just a tragic fall. They did ask many of the party attendees to come back later for interviews, but what's shocking is what wasn't done. No fingerprints were collected, no DNA taken from underneath Tamla's fingernails, and no procedure performed to check for a possible sexual assault. The lead detective did note one thing, that the position of Tamla's body seemed strange. She was face down, which didn't quite fit with the story of a simple fall. And remember, Jean's house was equipped with a security system that logged every door opening and closing, notifications sent right to her phone. Jean showed investigators the system's log, which revealed something interesting. At 1:49 a.m., the back door leading out to the balcony opened. 1 minute later, at 1:50 a.m., it closed again. And then 7 minutes later, it opened once more and stayed open until Jean and Jose came downstairs the next morning. Now, according to them, the door was just left wide open, but that detail raised more questions than answers. As police continued their interviews, the timeline of who left when began to take shape. After Bridget left at 1:47, the next guest to leave was a woman named Marcy. She left at around 4:10 a.m., explaining that she had to get to work early. And then at 7:45 a.m., another guest, Paula, she left. And then around 8:30 a.m., Stacy and her husband Tom, the other male guest at the party, left as well. Jennifer, whose husband had dropped her off and picked her up, also left around the same time. The pieces of the night's puzzle were starting to come together, but they only raised more questions about what actually happened. Now, although Jean's home was equipped with a security system that reportedly had video surveillance, it was ironically not recording the night Tamla died. And 2 hours after police arrived on the scene, Tamla was officially pronounced dead. Her body was eventually taken in for an autopsy, but even as they waited for the medical examiner's report, Police continued to treat Tamla's death as nothing more than an unfortunate accident, and the Forsyth County Medical Examiner backed up that story. They ruled Tamla's death accidental, claiming that she had a blood alcohol level nearly 3 times the legal limit, along with traces of marijuana and Xanax in her system. According to the medical examiner, intoxication likely played a role in her fall. People at the party had told police Tamala was smoking weed that night, but that Jean had asked her to stop because of Jose's job. Police later said that they found rolling papers in Tamala's purse. Now, these details were used to reinforce the idea that she was impaired enough to fall to her death. They even pointed to an unlit cigarette found on the porch and the security system door logs to support their conclusion. In their eyes, Tamla had gone out to smoke at around 1:57 a.m. and then accidentally fell from the balcony. Case closed. But to those who knew and loved Tamla, that explanation never made sense. Yes, Tamla was known to enjoy herself, and maybe she had been drinking that night, but no one, not even the people at the party, described her as stumbling, slurring, or sloppy drunk. So if she wasn't as impaired as they claimed, then why would she just fall? When the autopsy report came back, the questions only deepened. The medical examiner listed Tamla's injuries as consistent with a fall, but the extent of those injuries raised eyebrows. The balcony she supposedly fell from was about 15 to 20 feet, a fall that could hurt someone, maybe even break bones, but not necessarily kill them. Tamla had suffered blunt force trauma to the head, a broken neck, a dislocated wrist, lacerations to her heart, and multiple scrapes and bruises across her face, fingers, arms, and legs. But here's the thing, Tamla was wearing a long sleeve fleece onesie, and so how did she get cuts on her arms and legs? How did she dislocate her wrist and break her neck and end up face down from a fall off a relatively low balcony into open grass? Photos from the scene show no rocks, no bushes, no sharp debris, just grass and a line of mulch that bordered the yard. And her body, even if she had fallen, would have landed past that mulch line. There's no indication that she moved after she hit the ground. Still, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office officially closed the case on February 19th, 2019. But Tamla's loved ones were suspicious from the beginning. The idea that she had simply fallen never sat right with them. They knew her. They knew that something was wrong, and there were problems from the start. Her family was never given access to the autopsy photos, and they were forced to rely solely on the written report just to try to piece together what had happened. And then there were the inconsistencies, not just in the investigation, but in what the investigators were telling the family. Early in the case, the lead detective, Mike Christian, told Tamla's father, Kurt St. Jour, that Tamla's injuries looked like she had suffered a quote unquote ground fall, meaning that she didn't fall from the balcony. In fact, one early police report even states that officers initially believed that she had tripped over some landscaping and then died. But that theory didn't hold up. It made no sense, and so quietly they changed the story, and the balcony theory was introduced later. And Christian admitted that it had been a mistake to tell Tamla's father about the original story. But was it really a mistake, or was it just a case of the evidence not matching the version of the story that they had decided to go with? But as time went on, Tamla's family and friends, more and more, began to question the police's investigation and the stories being told by the people at that party. Then something happened that changed everything. A photo from that night started circulating online. Tamla, the only black woman at a party full of white people, smiling on a couch in her paw print onesie. People online were drawn to her story immediately. The image was unsettling, and it sparked the first wave of questions across social media about what really happened to Tamla Horsford. One of her closest friends became a driving force behind the campaign for justice, and soon, the way the investigation had been handled or mishandled was under a microscope. The scene hadn't been properly secured. Police didn't collect key evidence, and while they spoke to people at the scene, formal interviews didn't happen for 2 full days, giving everyone plenty of time to get their stories straight. And still, those stories didn't match. According to reports, there were inconsistencies in what guests said, especially when it came to what time they woke up. The security system could track door activity, but not who was leaving and who was moving around inside. Now, one report suggests that Jean's aunt, Madeline, may have been up as early as 7:30 a.m., and another guest, Jennifer, told police that she woke up between 7:30 and 7:45 and was waiting for her husband. By 8 a.m., Jennifer allegedly told investigators that Madeline was up acting suspicious. But Jennifer later changed her statement to match Madeline's timeline. Now, if Jennifer's original version was true, it means that Madeline may have seen Tamla's body almost 2 hours before anyone called 911. Madeline first said that she found the body when she went outside to check the weather, but later she claimed that she saw Tamla through the window, and then she prayed before alerting Jean and Jose. There were also questions about the timeline of arrivals. Jean initially told police that Tamla was the last guest to arrive, but that wasn't true. Another woman came after Tamla, and the now infamous group photo on the couch, well, it was taken before the final guest had even shown up. The photo, by the way, was taken by Madeline. And all of these inconsistencies only fueled suspicion. Something about this didn't feel right, and it wasn't just Tamla's loved one saying it. Even one of the women who left the party early that night told police that she couldn't understand how Tamla could have fallen. She said that she had been on that deck 100 times, looked at it from every angle, and even when she was drunk, but she couldn't figure out how Tamla would have fallen. The questionable investigation and the strange behavior of those at the party led many to believe that this was more than just a tragic accident. This was a cover up. And it didn't escape anyone that this was happening in Cumming, Georgia, a town where only 4% of the population is black, a place known for years as a gathering point for white supremacists. For decades, Cumming had been an all white town, openly hostile to black residents. And while the racial makeup of the area had slowly begun to shift, the history remained, and it still lingered just beneath the surface. So people began to ask if this had been a white woman found dead at a party full of black people in a predominantly black neighborhood, would the police have treated the case the same way? But in the months after Tamla's death, her family and friends did everything they could to keep her story alive, and social media became a powerful tool. But there was one detail that couldn't be ignored, and that was Jose's job. He wasn't just Jean's boyfriend. He was a former probation officer, and at the time worked in pretrial services. In a small town like Cumming, that meant that he very likely knew and possibly had influence with the very officers investigating Tamla's death. But as attention to the case grew, people who attended the party started to receive death threats. Eventually, some of them filed a lawsuit against one of Tamla's vocal supporters, accusing her of putting them in danger by naming them and sharing their photos online. But that lawsuit was ultimately dismissed. In December 2018, just a month after Tamla's death, Jean's boyfriend Jose was fired from his job as a pretrial service officer. The reason? He had been caught trying to access files related to Tamla's case, records he had no business looking at. To the public, this only added to the growing suspicion around him. Why try to access the files unless you were trying to control the narrative or hide something? But by that time, police had already closed the case, and Tamla's story had already started to fade from the headlines. Like so many other cases involving black women, the interest didn't last. But in 2020, amid a national reckoning around racial justice and police accountability, Tamla's case came roaring back into the public conversation. That now infamous photo of her, the only black woman at a sleepover with all white guests, started circulating online once again, sparking new outrage. This time, it caught the attention of celebrities like 50 Cent, T.I., and Kim Kardashian, who all used their platform to demand answers and call for a new investigation. Then, on June 5th, 2020, the Horsford family attorney released a statement after completing their own independent investigation into Tamla's death, and what they found was alarming. The letter read, quote, "Witness statements are in conflict. A potential subject handled the body as well as the evidence prior to law enforcement arrival. A remarkable fact is that there were no photographs taken during the autopsy of Tamla's body. This had been done at someone's directive because such a practice is unheard of." The letter also stated plainly that there was strong reason to believe that Tamla had been murdered. Just 1 week later, under mounting public pressure and renewed attention, the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office asked the Georgia Bureau of Investigation to take over the case. By the summer of 2020, the GBI had officially reopened the investigation into Tamla's death, and for a brief moment, there was hope. Hope that maybe this time the truth would finally come out. But as the months passed, the headlines once again quieted. Like so many social justice movements online, the momentum faded and people moved on to the next story. Still, Tamla's family and friends held on. They were hopeful that the GBI's involvement, an outside agency, would bring real answers, that this time they wouldn't be ignored. But that hope was short lived. On July 26, 2021, just over a year after the GBI began their investigation, they announced their conclusion. They would not be filing any charges, and they agreed with the original finding that Tamla's death was nothing more than a tragic accident. Once again, Tamla's loved ones were left with more questions than answers, and once again, they made it clear that they do not accept the findings. They do not believe that Tamla's death was an accident, and they have vowed to continue fighting for answers, for truth, and for justice. It's been almost 7 years since Tamla went to a birthday party and never came home. To this day, there are still many unanswered questions about what happened that night. From the beginning, the story given was that Tamla accidentally fell from a balcony after a night of drinking, but for many, that explanation has never fully made sense. But what's often overlooked is who Tamla was. Beyond the headlines and speculation, she was a devoted mother of 6, including her stepdaughter, who was pregnant at the time with what would have been Tamla's first grandchild. She was a wife, a friend, and someone deeply loved by those around her. Despite the ruling that her death was accidental, those closest to Tamla have continued to raise concerns about the investigation, from how the scene was handled to the conflicting witness statements to the injuries detailed in the autopsy report. And they have not accepted that this was an accident. Nearly 7 years later, they're still searching for answers. And her story remains important, not only because of how she died, but because of the fight to understand why. And until that fight ends, her story will continue to be told. May Tamla Horsford rest in peace. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Threads.